Hello, I'm Dan Alexander. Welcome to another installment in my web series. Today, I'd like to talk about the Glyn Johns drum miking technique. As you may know, Glyn Johns was the first independent recording engineer in the United Kingdom. He recorded the Beatles, the Stones, the Kinks, and the Who, among other people. He's brilliant, a great recording engineer. His technique for miking drums is very unique and very effective. And I'd like to share the details with you. So, we are using 4 microphones to mic the drum kit: a kick drum mic, a snare drum mic, an overhead microphone that is in between the snare drum and the ride toms, pointing down, cardioid, large diaphragm condenser microphone. That is panned to one side. There's the 4th microphone is out from the floor tom. It is up above the level of the skin of the floor tom by 3 to 6 inches. It's probably out from the floor tom by about 8 to 12 inches. It's facing across the floor tom, across the snare drum, and at the hi-hat. That is panned to the opposite side from the overhead microphone. If you listen to those 2 microphones, left and right, you'll hear the kick drum coming from one side and the snare drum coming from the other. You bring the snare drum mic and the kick drum mic up to center the kick drum and the snare drum, and you're done. Now, this technique depends on having a drummer who can tune his drums and an environment to record them in that actually sounds good. If the drummer is not capable of tuning his drums properly, if he can't balance the various elements of his drum kit by himself, or if the room that you're recording in is not acceptable sounding, this technique is not going to produce a great sounding result. However, assuming the drummer is good and the room is good, this tech, you can set up 20 microphones on the drums and spend 3 days getting your drum sound. And if you're lucky, it will sound as good as what you can do with this technique in a half an hour. And here's I'm not a very good artist, but this is a sort of a drawing of the technique. You have your overhead and your other floor tom microphone, and your kick and your snare, and that's a very Egyptian way of drawing a drum kit, I suppose. So, in any case, I'd like to illustrate this with a little story. At Coast on Harrison, I was one day I was recording a session for Sun Microsystems. It was an instrumental version of Higher Ground by Stevie Wonder. I don't know what they were doing with it. The bass and drums were played by the Russell brothers, very fine players. And the drummer was Steve Smith from Journey. And Steve Smith is incredible. He comes in with his roadie. He's the first to arrive. He comes in with his roadie. They're each carrying a pair of these big copper tom-toms. And I go up to him and I say, hi, I introduce myself. I'm going to engineer this session. He says, I got 8 of these. I said, I don't care. I'm only going to use 4 microphones. And he looks at me like I'm crazy. And I say to him, look, I'll set up the mics. We'll record something. If you don't like it, I'll do it any way you want. So 20 minutes later, he's set up. I record something. He comes in, he listens, he says, oh man, I got to play some Led Zeppelin. And he goes out into the room and he plays Black Dog by himself from beginning to end. His drums sounded incredible. The room at Coast on Harrison was wonderful. It was 45 by 40 with 20-foot ceilings, and it sounded great. So an hour after Steve Smith arrives, we're all set up and ready to record. And his comment was, man, usually the engineer would still be working on my tom-tom microphones. Okay, so that's it. The reason this technique works so well is because so few microphones make such a small amount of phase cancellation. When you get a ton of microphones on a drum kit, there's all kinds of phase stuff going on. It's crazy. So try this. It's wonderful. I hope you will check it out. All right. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. And I hope to see you again soon. Thank you.